Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week of English 200, 201, and 202. This week, we are going to be focusing on plot. But before you focus on anything, I want to remind you that you must enter the Jessamine West Writing Contest by April 15th, this Friday, at noon. So noon is the deadline on Friday. It's a different kind of deadline for us this week. Make sure you enter by Friday at noon. I'll go over that a little more in a second. You're also going to be reading about plot, the main structure of how a story is structured. You're going to read two short stories, Hiding by Susan Minot and How to Tell a True War Story by Tim O'Brien. And both of those are found in Serious Daring. So, Jessamine West Contest, this is the final week. Your entries are due at noon on Friday. You are required to enter. This is your main assignment for this week. You are not required to do a formal assignment. This is your assignment. So, English 200 participants, you need to enter in one genre, and you have to make the deadline or you get 0 on your assignment. You have to write either a poem, revise a poem. Please, you use one of the assignments we've already done in this class. Do not write a new one, or a short story that we've written, or a creative nonfiction piece that you wrote. English 201 and 202, you are required to enter in all 3 genres. You can enter 1 to 5 poems. You can enter fiction. And you can enter a creative nonfiction piece, all 3. Now, English 200 students, you can enter in all 3 genres as well if you'd like and get extra credit for doing so. So if you enter in 3, if you want extra credit, just enter in 3 genres, okay? All 3. I will have office hours on Tuesday and Thursday this week. Please stop by if you want to work on your poems or stories or creative nonfiction pieces. I would love to talk to you about them. And we can, revise them together, whatever you'd like. If those times don't work for you, shoot me an email and we'll try to find another time that we can work together on the phone. All right, so this week we're going to be talking about plot. You're not going to have a formal assignment, as I mentioned, but plot is one of the, backbone things in every story. It's the arrangement of or sequence of events, chain reaction, where one event leads to another, where the author makes decisions about what to include or omit, and what order in which the events will be introduced. It's because the reasons that connect the events of the plot. Conflict is an obstacle that keeps a character from what he or she wants. Short stories have maybe 1 or 2 conflicts at the most. You want to, especially in the shorter ones that we're writing, you only want 1 major conflict. Complications are the various turning points and sub-conflicts in a story. And remember that when you're writing, the first draft is really to find out what your story is about. And as you revise, you try to find the path of your plot. There's 3 different ways you can start your story. You can start with an existing storyline or set of events from life, or an initial situation from which you work forward, or a stunning or concluding situation from which you work backward, okay? There's a shape, Aristotle came up with this shape to a story, which Freytag, as you'll read in your story, Gustav Freytag was a 19th century German playwright and novelist, and he took Aristotle's idea of how a story should be shaped by introducing these plot elements. Most stories begin with some sort of an exposition, and that's the beginning paragraphs where the scene is set, the setting is introduced, the main characters are introduced, the protagonist and usually the antagonist, and some sort of inciting incident, some sort of idea that could cause a conflict is introduced. And then there's a rising action, and that's where complications or barriers start to occur. Then there's a climax, and that's the turning point in the story. In the falling action, That's when things start to begin to be, begin to be resolved in some way, and the resolution is the conflict being the conflict is resolved by the end. Now, this is a real cookie cutter way to write a story, and most modern stories do not follow this exactly. But for generally, you do want to have some sort of an exposition. You do want to have some sort of a major conflict that is somehow resolved or left unresolved for a purpose. And this is a really good idea to kind of check your story against this plot structure to see, do I have an exposition? Do I have a rising action? Do I have a climax? Is there some sort of resolution in the end? It's a really good way to check your story. Doesn't mean you have to follow it, because there's a lot of ways to tell a story. So this is, normally a chronologically told story works best in Freytag's pyramid. But and that's when you follow a time-based linear structure. This happened and then this happened, right? But there's a lot of alternatives. You can use frame devices or flashbacks or flash forwards. You can braid your narrative from one point of view to another point of view. You can use short vignettes, little tiny stories within your story. You can reverse your chronology. You can start with the end and go backwards. Lots of ways to do this. And I really, really encourage you to try out some of these devices. All right, this week, though, we're only doing journal exercises. Just a reminder, your revision time should be spent on your Jessamine West entries. We are going to have 3 journal exercises this week. The first one is the skeleton. And just so you know, all of these really help you work on plot, okay? The skeleton asks you to practice writing a linear story in which a strong main character is on a quest for something important and specific. The object is a given. Don't explain its importance. The main character starts acting immediately. She then meets a specific obstacle of some sort, right? And make sure you introduce this main character and the setting in that first paragraph, okay? Finally, she triumphs over the obstacle by means of a magic or supernatural element that comes from the outside world. You may introduce minor characters, but the narrative should never abandon your main character. You're always telling the story from the main protagonist, okay? This story should be told through action and dialogue, and there's a limit of 500 words. And what I want you to think about when you're doing this exercise is, if you were a medical student, you would have to learn anatomy, right? You'd learn the names and locations of human bones before going on to more complex systems, right? A beginning writer must also be able to handle and control basic plot before moving on to more subtle elements, right? Like what we were talking about before, like frame devices and flashbacks and flash forwards, or a character's motivation, subtext, right? All of these things. Like many of the greatest novels are written in a quest motif. Moby Dick, for instance, is a quest story. A journey, like David Copperfield. And this idea of triumphing over an obstacle, like in Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. These works also concentrate on one protagonist, one main character, and end, if not happily, at least on an emotionally satisfying point of resolution, okay? I want you to practice writing a classic story like this, okay? Really practice this with this exercise. The next thing I'd like you to work on is from situation to plot. If you think too hard about a plot, usually when you're writing at the expense of the character, like it's only plot driven, it's usually a mistake. Remember, character driven is usually the way to write. So this exercise asks you in a few sentences to create a specific character in a specific situation. I want you to complicate his life with opposing forces and alternatives within that situation. So ask, given the situation, what would my character want, right? What would my character do? How would he act or react? How will those actions propel the story toward a point of crisis and a final resolution? You want to practice creating characters involved with specific situations, then outline mini plots for how you would complicate their situations and move them towards an ending. So the reason why we're doing this exercise is to understand how the most effective plots are those driven by character, right? We're just practicing writing a plot that's driven by character. To see how a character within the given of any situation creates his own destiny, okay? All right, the next and last journal entry that we're going to do is kind of fun. It's called the story machine. So it's a lot of times, you're going to feel like, I don't know what to write about, right? I got to think of all these stories every week. Dr. Dunkel's always like, write a story. And I'm like, I don't know what to write a story about, right? Or maybe you just feel like all stories have already been told, right? This little exercise here helps you really kind of rev up your creativity. It gives you some ideas and makes you try to make something from nothing, basically. So here's what I would like you to do. You're going to choose one vocation from list A, and one strange behavior from list B. So list A has an Apple Genius bar worker, a drug dealer, a first grade teacher, a hairdresser, a truck driver, a ship captain, and a high school speech and debate champion, okay? Strange behaviors are auditions for a cooking show, set the parakeet free, folded 1,000 paper cranes, tune the piano, begins work at a homeless shelter, tries hot yoga, or goes geocaching. Okay, those are all the strange behaviors. So I would like you to choose one from A and one from B, any one, okay? And then I want you to ask, why did A do B in order to create the last scene of your story? So why did the Apple Genius bar worker try hot yoga? Okay, and that's your last scene. And then I want you to supply motive for the strange behavior. So you're going to work from that scene backwards. You're going to supply a setting and a conflict that might be resolved by this behavior. Imagine a scene prior to the final scene that demonstrates the severity of the conflict. Imagine a scene that demonstrates that initial difficulty. And the reason why, we're going to do this is because retrograde plotting is often a revelation to the beginning writer who has again and again found herself staring off into space about the type in front of your, computer, asking, now what happens, right? Writing toward a conclusion for some writers is easier than exploring the consequences of an imagined premise. One more easily discovers the beginnings of things if one knows the ending. The story machine requires you to it requires you to start with the end and work backwards. And so it really teaches you how to set up a plot backwards, okay? And it's fun. So this is meant to be fun. If you can't find something fun, and get weird on this one. This is meant to be weird, okay? All right, guys. That's it for this week. It's a shorter lecture because what I want you to do is I want you to revise your poems, your stories, and your creative nonfiction for the Jessamine West contest. We are going to take this, you guys. This class has some amazing writers in it, and I can't wait to see what you do. I can't wait to see your revised pieces. You will not have to turn anything in for you'll turn it into the Jessamine West contest, and I will get a list of everyone who turned it in. So don't worry about telling me because I will know. And I hope that you will come to the ceremony, which takes place. Let's see if I can pull it up. I don't think I can. Here we go. The ceremony takes place. You can see how crazy my desktop is. The ceremony will take place on Tuesday, May 14th from 3 to 5 p.m. in the community room. And if you win, you will be invited to come. But even if you don't win, you will be invited to come and you will get extra credit for coming. So please mark your calendars, May 14th, 3 to 5 p.m. Come, show up, either read your winning poem or story, or come support your classmates, because hopefully we're going to have some winners, okay? So I look forward to seeing you guys online.